and we're going to be talking tonight to Eleanor Scott. So hello, Eleanor.
Ah.
So Ellie, I've not known Ellie for long, but Ellie is a tutor on our feral art courses, and we're going to learn a bit tonight about Ellie's fashion design label, her approach to fashion and to sustainable fashion, and also her PhD studies. So Ellie's prepared a slideshow for us, and she's going to share that. She's going to share the screen. As ever, we'll have about 40 minutes discussing Ellie's work, and then in the last sort of 20 minutes, there'll be some time for you all to type any questions in the chat function, using your chat function. And we've got Jane Jones on the phone. Say good evening, Jane Jones on the phones.
Hello, everybody.
Hello from Jane Jones on the phones. I can't see you, Jane. I don't believe you're there.
I've brushed my hair as well.
She is there. I'm not talking to myself. So, Ellie, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah.
So we're going to share your screen.
Yeah.
And you've got some slides to show us.
I do. 1 second, let me share this screen. There we go. Let me start from the beginning. Right. Ooh, I'm getting to the end bit. I've skipped the good bit. There we go. Right then. So, thank you for that introduction, Dom. That was lovely. It was very accurate as well, which is good. So I'm a knitwear designer from Hull. I have a kind of strange background. Before I ended up in knitwear design, I had been a hand knitter. Since I was about 6. My grandma was a really kind of very talented knitter. She did it all the time, and she taught me to knit when I was very young. So I'd been a hand knitter pretty much since I was 6, and then I was lucky enough to be able to go to college, and my tutors, I went to White College in Hull, and my tutors were really kind of set on me developing that as a skill. Yeah. So I was able to use knitted textiles in my fine artwork from about the age of 16, which was really great for me. But at the same time, I was studying illustration. And I then went to applying for unis, which obviously is quite difficult. And at the time, it was a strange situation for me because everyone wanted to accept me on their knitted textiles courses, but not on their fashion or just textiles courses. And the one place that accepted me on just a textiles course was Birmingham Institute of Art and Design, which is a fantastic art and design school. And in the end, I moved on to a constructed textiles degree, and then started just studying knit and weave. So I did a lot of woven textiles, as well as knitwear. Well, knitted samples, never knitwear. They only ever knitted fabric. They didn't knit any fashion items. So that was my kind of educational background.
And so were you kind of like, before that, were you always making your own clothes and in your spare time?
I was embarrassing when I think of it now. So I used to have this little company with my friend Yasmin, she's one of my best friends. We used to like knit and sew little like hair bows and things and sell them, and they're awful. When I see people find them now when they're sorting out their things, and they send me pictures of them, and I'm like, oh God, that's horrific. I was like 14. I was always making my own clothes. And when I was at uni, it was really difficult for me because they just wanted me to make flat samples, and my graduate collection was this like crazy conceptual like fashion items. I did huge dresses. I tried to find some images of them, but I couldn't find them actually. That was back in 2012. And I remember my tutor marking it, saying like, oh, you should have maybe done fashion. And I was thinking, well, oh, I can't win. So I've always been kind of in the middle of many different specialisms, and I found that quite hard. And I think that's to do with knitwear, because there's only 2 actual knitwear design degrees in the UK. The rest are just general textiles design degrees, where you can specialise. But yeah, I found that a bit of an issue actually. But also because I loved illustration, and I still do love illustration. I do a lot of drawing. I still wanted to be able to do things like printed textiles, which is something I do a lot of on like the feral courses and things. I don't like to just kind of stick to one thing.
Yeah, yeah. And so would all the designs begin as drawings?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so the designs that you can see on screen right now. So me and my family, my mum and dad and my brother, went to Iceland when I was about 11. And the backdrop there is some images that I took and when I was about, well, yeah, I would have been about 11. Some images I took in Iceland, and I'd found and edited to use as the backdrop when I did the collection. So all of the things that are used in the shoots are things that I've designed or photographed, or so everything sort of like this collection was inspired by different landscapes, different kind of rock formations, different like natural phenomenon, and yeah, I just did. I was really kind of inspired by that trip, I think. It was just such a different kind of landscape, and it was such a slower life as well. It was so much less busy. And I tried to kind of portray that in the clothing.
I see. So can you tell us a bit more about like the how are these garments constructed then?
Yeah, so when I first graduated, I started working for 2 different companies. I was really lucky. I got an internship in one place and an actual job as a freelance designer in another one. They were both different, completely different sectors. So one of them, I was a freelance designer. And as a freelance designer, I would knit tiny little jumpers. So it was just like a small jumper front, and give them to my agent, who would take them to trade shows and sell them. And a company would buy them and then reproduce however many of them in their big factories abroad. But at the same time, I was interning as a knitwear designer for a luxury label. And at that time, I was using the same machinery. I was designing the same type of clothes. I was using the same yarns and fibres. The garments I was designing would have to be manufactured in the same way to be kind of possible to reproduce. And I noticed there was a really big gap in the market for this kind of handmade, kind of slow method of production. And I was kind of doing this for the luxury label, and a jumper would sell at like £900. But then I was doing it the same way. I think Marks and Spencer's bought one of my jumpers. And they'd be doing it on their obviously huge machinery and things, but it could be so easily done on my domestic knitting machinery. And so I kind of noticed that there was this kind of gap where things couldn't be scaled up and things couldn't be sustainable. So I started designing garment shapes basically that could be knitted in one piece. So normally when you buy knitwear, it could be manufactured in a number of ways. There's cut and sew knitwear, where they'll knit huge panels of fabric, cut out the garment shape, overlock it, then link it together. So basically it's the same as woven fashion. And it's extremely wasteful. My research has shown it's about 30% of a garment's fabric would be wasted if you did it in the cut and sew method. There's also fully fashioned knitwear, which is what I do at Nor, where every stitch that's within a garment is just moved and it's shaped It's very lengthy. If you're not well practiced in it, it can be very tricky. It can go wrong very easily. And it's often not viable for industry to do it. And then there's a new type called seamless knitwear, which is still very new to the market, but it's so difficult for anyone to actually do and so expensive that it's very rarely used by the industry. So I was this kind of midpoint with fully fashioned knitwear, where the back and front would be knitted at the same time, which would never happen in industrial fully fashioned knitwear. There was no seams on the shoulder lines, so it was more comfortable. And there'd be no waist. The waist would be, well, I say no waist. I would have to cut off ends to make the knitwear neat, but the waste would be so minimal and it could be recycled. So Nor was really sustainable, and it was a very kind of new way of working. And when I first started and did this collection, I thought I'd be able to just knit it during the day, post it out, very kind of like made on demand. But as Nor grew, that was quite difficult.
Yeah. But so does that mean that there's a lot more challenges in the design elements? So would you be able to design a one-piece garment without using computer packages that are available now, or?
Yeah, so I could design in that way, but it's so lengthy. I mean, I have a lot of knitwear software, and I am trained in some of the industrial knitwear software, but it's really difficult to completely design out waste. But it's also really difficult for brands and manufacturers to understand the need to design out waste, and also to get them to understand the kind of the positives of changing their design methods now, instead of leaving it too late. So it's really difficult because it often makes the price shoot up, which is something I tried really hard not to do. And I did manage actually quite well with Nor. I'll move on to my next. I'll show you my next one. So my first collection, which was the one you've just seen, it was all inspired by like the Icelandic landscape. It was very kind of, it was quite, I always say it was quite selfish. It was everything I loved. It wasn't commercial at all. But I managed to land a contract with Topshop, and it debuted in the Topshop Oxford Circus store, and it was just crazy because it was my first collection, and all of a sudden I had to knit loads and loads of garments. And bless my mum like stayed in my studio and linked everything. I think my mum nearly had a nervous breakdown. It was it was ridiculous. I was so tired. I don't think I slept at all for ages. And I remember us all driving down in my brother's van, just full of knitwear. And yeah, it was just crazy. But that was where it debuted. And it suddenly did very well. And I was kind of just knitting it all at the beginning. On my domestic machinery. Some of it had like hand knit finishes, but it was all very much, it was done by hand on machinery that wasn't powered in any way. But yeah, it was such hard work. So I decided that I needed to gather what I call a knitting circle. So thankfully, because of the degree I did and the kind of people I knew, I was able to kind of gather people that had knitting machinery that was the same as mine. It was the same gauge as mine, which means that it's the stitches would be the same size. And I would send them knitting patterns, and they were freelancers, but they worked for Nor. And whenever they got a chance, they would knit, I don't know, 50 sleeves for me and then post them to me. So I changed my kind of manufacture. Well, I scaled up my manufacturing in a very kind of, how do I explain it? It was very craft based. It was craft based manufacturing basically. It was people would come into the studio that I knew had the skills and had the machinery and the time. I would teach them, obviously pay them very well, teach them to learn how to knit kind of like a practice jumper front or a practice sleeve. And then I would send them off and say, you just do it whenever you want. I'll pay you however much this unit. It was all very well paid, which is something I feel very passionately about, especially in the fashion industry, which is so well renowned for like sweatshops and things.
Yeah,
it's very well paid. So they
yeah.
wanted to do it and they really cared about it being well made. Yeah, and they'd have however long they wanted to send me my order. And I had an amazing group, I'd say, of maybe 6 or 7 freelance knitters who I still keep in touch with to this day really well. Yeah, who absolutely loved doing it actually, and I loved working with them. Yes, so it's a really different way of working.
Yeah, it sounds like a great process if you can make it work, but it sounds like it could be quite nerve-wracking if you're waiting for a parcel of 50 sleeves from southeast Lincolnshire or something, and they're a bit delayed in the post. Or
I remember once I had 3 knitters from Glasgow. I think they had a really good textile design degree at Glasgow School of Art, and they did a lot of knitwear, so there's quite a lot of knitters there. And I'd done the knit and stitch show in Harrogate with a few people a few years before, and got to know some people there, and asked them if they would mind helping me out. And obviously they were fine with it. I think they were really happy actually to get some work. And we kind of developed designs with them. But I remember once someone from Glasgow, a knitting machine just completely broke, and I ended up staying for like 2 nights overnight, even though I did that most nights anyway. Just knitting loads and loads of things because she couldn't do it on a machinery. But it was no fault of her own. It's just one of them things. All our machines are vintage. And the parts, if you can't find them at the time, you can't find them. A lot of people 3D print the parts that break and things now because they just don't exist.
So do you use machines that are vintage because they have special qualities in the production?
No.
Or is it just that they're more expensive?
The reason why I use my knitting machinery, or the machinery I do, is because mostly of cost. Industrial knitting machinery costs about minimum 40 grand per machine. Yeah, they're huge. The weight of them alone, you couldn't have them on a normal floor. You couldn't have them upstairs anywhere, that's for sure. Right. They are absolutely huge. They aren't taught in educational settings. And although I am trained in them now, the disparities between them, I've learned I'm able to, because I am trained in them, I'm able to kind of counteract with the knitting technology I have available to me. So I use the most at the moment anyway, I use the most industrial domestic knitting machine, which is still quite expensive. But it's secondhand. I was so lucky the other week, I saw someone in Anlaby put one up for sale, and literally snapped it up within 10 minutes because I know how hard they are to get. Yes, another thing I would say is I'm completely self-taught in that as well, because that type of machine isn't on the curriculum in any educational settings. But it's so much fun to teach, and people used to use them for leisure. So I wouldn't say that that's a drag to do. And they are extremely hard, and having a good knowledge of hand knitting and textile design in general will only help if you're looking to learn something like domestic knitting machinery.
So can you tell us a bit more about these 2 designs that we can see now? Because they're quite strikingly different.
They're so different. So as I said, my first collection was all about me being selfish. So I felt a bit downtrodden at uni. I thought I'd go to an art school and everyone would be like real wacky and they'd love like the things I loved, and they were all real dull and like didn't really do anything that different. So I made sure that my first kind of collection was exactly what I wanted to do, that I didn't feel like I was able to do because I just wanted that first or whatever, which I didn't get. yeah, so my first collection was really selfish. It was just things I loved, colours I loved. Yeah, it was what I liked at the time. And then this collection, because I've got Topshop and I've just got a contract with ASOS at this point, I was like, crap, I have to be commercial.
Yeah.
So I looked at my bestsellers at the time and reworked them. I started looking at trends and things and started developing more commercial designs. And I had to think much more about the time it took. Although at the beginning, I was still thought about the time it took because I needed to make a profit and I wanted it to be fair for me knitting it. But I did have to think at this point, like I know what price point things were selling at better. And I had to kind of design, because the manufacturing method was completely kind of controlled by the design of it. I had to really think about that. And so these, it was almost like I sold out a little bit, but I still loved them. I still loved all my designs, and I wouldn't have made anything that I didn't love. But yeah, this was much more kind of informed from what went well with the first collection, what was too difficult, what didn't sell, what was too difficult to make, what did my freelancers struggle with, what yarns didn't kind of keep the quality that I really, really wanted Nor to have. So this was kind of like my grown-up collection, I would say. It was much more informed.
And are you thinking about, I know, I mean, the little bit that I know about fashion is that it's often like seasonally linked. So is that the same with knitwear, that you're thinking in terms of spring, summer, autumn, winter?
This was a summer collection, and I was really focused on trying to make it not warm and cozy, as you can probably see with a mini skirt and a bralette. And that bralette was my bestseller to date. I made so many of them, and by the end of it, I could knit one in about 20 minutes. And there was no power or anything involved. I just had like my flatbed knitting machine, had all like needles coming forward, and I'd just transfer stitches, and it was like I'd knit lace. And I got so used to knitting them, I didn't bother giving them to any freelancers because I just knew it was a bit intricate.
Yeah.
But I just could do it on autopilot because I knitted so many. Yeah, it was a summer collection. Now I mean, at the time, although my design methodology has always been really deeply rooted in sustainability, sustainability wasn't as big as an issue back then. And I used to worry that kind of I was doing myself an injustice by solely focusing on that. Now, I would not design for seasons. I think it puts a kind of best before date on a garment.
Yeah.
And I think it just adds to the problem. But back then, although I was still classed as very sustainable, because I only ever did 2 collections a year, and now there's about 52 collections a year from any popular brand, which is ridiculous. And a brand now, a brand like Zara or Topshop, they can draw a design up and it can be kind of on the shop floor within about 8 days, which is just unbelievable when you think about it. And there's no way I could ever do that. But thankfully, when I set Nor up, I thought, I'm fine with that. I'll just do 2 collections a year. But I say that like it was easy. It was still impossibly hard because I'd make like thousands of these for my contracts. And not only would I be like project managing everyone, I'd also be knitting myself. And it was very, very hard, very, very hard. And that actually led me to get into lecturing. And so I could actually pay more people to work, because I found it quite lonely. I used to sit in I was really lucky. My dad owned a building down Alfred Gelder Street in Hull, and he really kindly let me use a space in his studios. I had a lovely city centre studio, and I spent a lot of time there on my own until very late at night. In fact, I used to sleep there a lot. And actually, it started to suck the fun out of it.
Yeah.
And I used to love the designing part and the making part. So I decided to get into lecturing, and I loved it. And I ended up as the fashion and clothing course manager at Bishop Burton for 6 years. No, 5 years. No, for a long time. Anyway, I loved it. I've only just left. Yeah, and I actually did that so that I could pay more freelancers to knit, so I could enjoy being around other people and enjoy being around creatives. And yeah, it sounds strange, but it did kind of slow Nor down in a way because I was tired from that, but I could stay true to the bit that I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of creatives end up doing.
Absolutely, yeah. But also having that knowledge of the industry would have been really valuable. Talking to students, teaching students, was it?
Oh, definitely. And I loved that job. It was so hard for me to leave. I've only left this summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely loved that job. And I also worked as the knitted textiles lecturer at Bradford College. I was the level 6 tutor on their textile design course. So I was really lucky that my industry work meant that I was able to kind of fulfill those roles quite easily. So yeah, at this point, this is when I accepted a job there. And things kind of changed from there. My design thinking changed from there because there wasn't as much pressure on me financially anymore. And I did kind of sell out for this collection, which is fine because I loved it still. And it's everything that I would wear. But yeah, things change. I'll show you my next collection. Let me find it. So at this point, I was like fed up of seeing knitwear on the high street being really boring and frumpy, and everything was the same and everything was made in the same way. So I started trying to use knitwear to be a bit more kind of sexy and fun. And this was actually a winter collection, but you'd be freezing in that. I know. And I started using a different range of yarns, and so I used like chenilles. What I will say here is during this time, this is a bit of a kind of strange subject, and people think differently about this, but I've always been very interested in kind of ethical materials and being against animal cruelty. And during this, obviously most people are, during this time I actually was the first knitwear label to be registered by PETA, the Protection of the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And we were the first ever knitwear label to stop using lamb's wools. And yeah, it was quite controversial at the time. Oh, can you hear my daughter screaming?
She's finished the pizza.
Yeah, it was quite controversial at the time. Because although there are kind of sustainable ways of producing wools and things, I couldn't find an affordable way of doing that for my price point. And my price point, if anyone's wondering, it was like high end of high street. So I didn't want to price people out. But I also wanted designs to be priced fairly. Yeah, so all of the designs that you've seen so far are made from cottons and recycled acrylics and organic cottons, only organic cottons. So the material used was always really well thought of. So yeah, Nor was registered as a vegan knitwear label, which was really strange at the time. I think people used to see it and think, I don't really know what that means. Whereas now I think it'd be much more understood. And through my research now, I have found some really interesting ways of using lamb's wool sustainably, but back then I couldn't actually find many things. Yeah, so that was a bit of a different kind of way of working at the time. So these were all recycled or organic materials.
Yeah. Did you also find working with those materials that they were more durable, or were they easy to work with? Or
I found one thing that was really useful with this, people would look at it and be like, oh God, thank God it's not going to itch me. Oh, thank God it's not, I can wash it. All of the things were machine washable.
Yeah.
None of them shrunk. They're all very durable. They piled less than certain animal fibres. So there were a lot of pluses to them. They were much easier for me to work with. If I ever, back in the day when I did work like mohairs and things, I'd do like a small bit of knitting with them and I'd come out in a rash all in my arms. Like because I find them quite kind of difficult. So that was when I started working with specific materials. I've pushed that much further now in my doctoral research, which I'll probably get to later. I've looked at kind of growing fabrics and using things like biofabrication, which I'll have to explain further on, I think. But yeah, this is probably about the time when I really started thinking about certifications of sustainable design, and started thinking about my role in the industry with that. And that's how I've kind of ended up working for the BFTT, the Business of Fashion, Textiles and Technology, who I work for now, who I'm a researcher for. Kind of working with people that certify materials and kind of lead the way in sustainable manufacturing. And a lot of them, I will say, use lambswool. So I do actually work now with a company called Cloudwool, who use sustainable lambswool. But I wouldn't have worked with it with Nor, because it was very much, it did well kind of with people that couldn't find products that were certified vegan.
This is probably a daft question, but so where can you just explain where Nor, the name Nor came from? Is it
right?
I'm thinking.
So my name is Eleanor.
Yeah.
It's the last three letters of my name.
Right. Yeah.
I'll tell you where it came from. I was sat in a pub in Birmingham with my friend's mum, trying to think of a name. She went, "Why do you call it Nor?" And I was like, "Oh, but it's because they all used to take the mick out of me and call me Nitty Nora."
There you go.
Which still happens now. And recently I've set up like a bit of a textiles art project, and I've called it Bloody Nora, like the northern saying. So I was always the Turken northerner. Yeah, I was always really, really kind of the odd one out in that sense. Yeah, Nitty Nora, it's my embarrassing nickname, but I'm fine with that.
Well, thanks for sharing it with all of us. If we see you in the street now, we can just go, Nitty Nora, you're right.
I am renowned for it now. I didn't realise that people call me that, but they do. Yeah.
Okay, so have we got some more to look at?
Yeah. So this is my final collection with Nor. So this came out in, I think, 2016. I haven't done a collection since. And again, I went back to my old ways with this. I was quite kind of selfish with it. And this is like the things that I would love to wear. And they were all manufactured in the same ways that I always did. My freelancers scaled up the manufacturing so that they could be brought onto the high street. And yeah, it was all very kind of dark and gothic and a bit kind of serious. And yeah, I absolutely loved this collection. It was like one of my favourite collections that I'd done. And I'd obviously done many little kind of mini drops along the way, like of new products. But yeah, this was my kind of finale, really.
So again, is this using the process where it's all one piece? Each garment is one piece.
Apart from, like, so the jumper, although I wouldn't be able to knit it in one piece, there was no waste. It was all zero waste. And yeah, it was all very difficult. I'd really kind of pushed my garment silhouettes. Yeah, it was what led me to think about kind of developing new technologies for knitwear, and maybe not focusing as much on selling it. Maybe focus more on developing software and developing new methodologies to kind of facilitate the production of sustainable knitwear. Because this one, again, was very selfish in the sense that it's exactly what I like wearing. It's quite dark, it's quite, I don't know, but it's still quite fun and a bit daring. But these garments, I wouldn't say could be manufactured like this or scaled up by a popular brand right now, unless they wanted to charge thousands for each one. And yeah, it was all quite interesting, really. So now I'll show you the next page. I did a lot of sewing for it as well, and I used X Industry, so it was dead stock faux leather. I kind of sewed different 3-dimensional garments, and yeah, it was quite that I liked surface makeup as well. I made a dress like Adamant. I've been to an Adamant concert. And I put like the black lines on something, and then I was like, oh, I'm going to do that to you when you model my garment. Can I just say one thing that I'm really lucky about is a lot of my very close friends model. I'm always the odd one out. I'm not the model. And they would always just come and wear my clothes, and we'd have a fun day together. So that was always really good for me. But yeah, this one did sell in Topshop. And it sold really well, actually, but it was too much work for me to actually do. I ended up asking for my contract there to be shortened. I couldn't keep up with the orders. I didn't have as many freelancers because I was so busy at work, teaching, and kind of the fun went out of everything. And I was like, I'm not enjoying this part of the industry, the selling part of the industry. It's not what I'm enjoying. And at this point, I was delving into 3D design quite a lot and 3D modeling on CAD software. And I'd been experimenting with 3D garment simulation. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's basically where you can design garments in like a virtual reality, and it's all very kind of tech based. And I kind of started delving into it from a crafts point of view, because I am very crafts based. I understand how to make things. But I started looking at new technologies and realizing that there was a kind of a way that craft-based designers could use new technologies. So when I made this collection, I think I kind of knew that this was going to be my little finale with Nor for the time being anyway. I was going to just make things that I absolutely loved. I wasn't going to think about the selling as such. It was all very dark. It was everything that I liked wearing. And I decided at this point to focus on my research, and I had a baby. So I decided to have a baby, and I couldn't use a knitting machine when I was pregnant. Impossible.
I see.
You're like,
yeah,
oh my God,
absolutely.
very difficult.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult. So yeah, this was like my little finale. This was the last thing I did with Nor. I think it was 2017. I can't remember very well, actually. But Nor isn't finished. I am keeping Nor on a hold until I develop or finish developing what I am doing for my PhD, which is kind of loosely linked to the business of fashion, textiles and technology, if anyone wants to look that up, which is a kind of sustainable initiative for the use of technology within different manufacturing roles. So they are helping develop new materials for fashion. I'm part of Work Project 7, where I'm developing new manufacturing methods. So yeah, so this was my last thing. And I had a lot of things go on in this time, and I just stopped making clothes.
So when you're designing these garments, are there particular other particular designers that particularly inspire you, and either or what other things inspire you to come up with some of these designs?
I would say a lot of music. I am very into music and kind of punk, and I love like Susie and the Banshees. I love things to be kind of a bit dark and gothic. And I've always grown up with things like that, because my mum and dad are really into things like that. So I've always been around things. But also, I've always liked things to be a bit anti-beautiful, like a bit kind of not to everyone's taste. I know that sounds strange. But there are certain designers which I absolutely love. So I love Issey Miyake, who is a very kind of leading user of new technologies in their garments. And
they're really well known for pleats as well, aren't they? And the way they fold garments.
Issey Miyake did they created something called APOC, which means a piece of cloth, and they used industrial knitting technology to create garments, knitted garments, that you could kind of dissect and reuse in different ways. And I've always loved that kind of work. So I suppose that's probably one of my big influences. I don't know if you can necessarily see it, because I think it's quite hidden in my work, how I manufacture things. Like you wouldn't know that it had no seams in certain places and things like that. And I think that was one of my difficulties, actually. It was because it wasn't obvious to a consumer that things were a bit different. And because I was selling in high street shops where everything was kind of mass produced, it was really hard to stand out. And that's one of the problems that the industry's having now with seamless knitwear. People see a seamless garment and they might read a special label on it that says this is seamless, and not understand that actually that's kind of better, more comfortable, etc. Because there is a lack of consumer awareness, and that isn't the consumer's fault. That's because why would you know that if you aren't a textile designer or a knitwear designer? So this was one of the problems, and I was kind of losing some of my momentum with it. I was tired. I've been doing season after season. I was teaching. I was also doing freelancing. So at the time, I did loads of menswear for All Saints as a kind of side project. That was exhausting. I was doing loads of stuff. I was non-stop. And then I settled down and decided I was going to take a bit of a break. And then I had my lovely daughter, Lorna, who's 2 now, who you'll probably hear very soon in the bath. So it was a bit of a strange time for me, but actually it was great because it led me to taking that step to doing my research, my PhD, which I've loved doing, absolutely loved doing. And it's been good. And it also meant that I kind of realised that there was other things I wanted to explore, which is what led me to my next stuff. So I'll show you my next slide. So I started knitting these crazy wall hangings, and they are crazy. So I've always been really interested in how kind of knit history was made. So knitting, no one knows where it actually originates from. But like first examples were like Egypt, and things weren't actually made of lamb's wool, they were made from cotton or silk. And people actually used to men knitted in in hand knitting guilds. And they would travel to different guilds all around Europe or elsewhere and learn different knit stitches. And it was almost like a uni course. They'd have 3 years to travel to all these different knitting guilds. And at the end of their kind of training, they'd have to knit a massive carpet it was called a masterwork. And if you look up my Instagram, it's just at @_bloodynora. I've actually got an example of a masterwork from a knitter. It's from I've just got the image from the V&A archives. But they all kind of depict these kind of folklore imagery. And I've always loved things like that. So I thought, right, I'm going to start using the knit software that I have available to me and kind of using it in a different way and try to push the boundaries of it. So there are specific rules with knitting software. Well, the ones I have anyway, but also in industry, where you can only knit a certain amount of colours per row. You can only program a certain amount of rows. There's a lot of kind of inbuilt stock patterns, which personally I think are great for when you're learning, but industry use them a lot. And it kind of stifles innovation. So I started just programming these really crazy things and just going for it when I was knitting them. And I've been able to do quite well from it, actually. I've really enjoyed doing it. And this was my first one, called Easy Tiger. It took me hours, and I say hours, it took me like weeks to knit, because at the time I was using this old, it's called a Passat P6000, what I use. It's huge, it's like this Swiss machinery. My machine was so battered and old, so stiff, and every row I'd have to knit like 8 rows to get any patterning. And God, I'd do like an afternoon, and then my arms would just be aching. I wouldn't be able to do any more. Yeah, so this one took hours and hours, and it sold straight away, actually, which I was really happy about. And yeah, it's
where does
all from ex-industry yarns. It's all recycled.
Oh, right, yeah. But what about the image itself? Is that something?
I'd found this like really bizarre medieval tapestry. It was an unknown source as well. No one knows who did it or anything. Of this man riding a tiger, and the tiger looked really kind of, I don't know, powerful, and this man looked like he was just scared stiff. So I thought, right, I'm going to kind of do a play on that. And I was kind of just letting myself depict things that I quite liked kind of doing. I thought I'd do a bit of a slogan. Yeah, and this again was a bit like my first collection for now. It was just things that I wanted to do. I think I'd felt so at this point I'd just written like 30,000 words for my PhD, and I was like, I just need to do something creative. I don't want there to be any rules. I just want to make something, and if someone wants it, they can buy it off me, but I'm not fussed about selling it. And yeah, I enjoyed doing it so much ever since. I've just not been able to stop doing it. So this was my first one. And yeah, I think at this point I was in like the throes of lockdown. And I think Lorna had just got back to nursery, because nursery had been shut, and I just thought, oh God, I can actually knit and make something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a kind of amalgamation of everything I'd been looking at, and all the kind of medieval tapestries and things I've been so influenced by and found so interesting and loved reading about. And I tried to do a kind of modern twist on it. The next one, if you can see here, oh, I've got a video here. I'll show you it. I'm sorry if it's really loud for anyone. So this is how my machine works. So I was really lucky. I did mention this earlier. I found someone in Hull that was selling a machine, but they were also selling a motor, which I haven't been able to come across for ages, or afford. And someone just down the road put one up for sale, and it meant that I didn't have to keep pulling the carriage across, which was great, because actually I found that too difficult to do. Let me show you. So you can see how it works like an old computer. The needles kind of punch the pattern in, and I have to program how they kind of select what colours are used when and where.
Do you still need to be sat there watching it all the time, supervising, or can you leave it to do its own work? Or
I've positioned it so that I can go inside, because I'm really lucky. I have a studio in my back garden. So I've positioned it so I can go inside and still see my machine when I go and make a cup of tea. But that's the most I would dare, because first of all, because of the way I do it, because you can only use 4 colours per row, I am changing colours constantly.
Yeah.
So I'm having to stop the machine, change the yarn, and that's something that you can't do in industry. So standard for industry is 4 colours per row, but 5 colours for the whole piece. I could actually use however many colours I wanted throughout a thing, because there's no rules for that with me. But it costs too much for industry, because it takes a long time to set up yarns and things and make sure that the tension's working okay. So there's lots of constraints in industry for things like that, but I'm able to kind of battle them. But this little Cupid that's on this side, it's like my favourite little thing. It's like a little cherub sprinkling magic on a harp player. So this imagery was influenced by a medieval manuscript that I found. that I just thought, I thought first of all, it was a nice play on me, because I have quite poor health, and I really struggle with an autoimmune condition, and I spend a lot of time that I don't want to be in bed because sometimes I just become very unwell and I have to deal with it. And yeah, I kind of thought this was, I think it was how I felt at the time. I think I was that skeleton. I think I'd been quite ill. Yeah, and I just thought it was a nice play on it, really. Yeah, so I tried to make it very my own. Yeah, and I think it's quite a fun, light-hearted, playful way to depict some quite dark things.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Very much
So
so.
I think now it'd be a good point to just say to everyone, if they've got any questions for you regarding anything they've seen or your work generally, now would be a good time to start thinking about typing them in the chat. Just as we sort of round off our discussion, Ellie, I think you've got a couple more images of you for us to have a look
I
at.
think I've got one more slide. I might
Yeah,
only have one more. Sorry.
that's okay. No, we've got about 10 more minutes, including.
Oopsie, sorry. Right. Yeah, so this was that piece of work finished. So I knit everything. I knit the rope, I make the tassels, I make the kind of like hanging mechanism. I actually think this bamboo was grown in my mum and dad's garden, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it is, because I know they have loads of bamboo plants and they give me loads of bamboo. Yeah, so they're huge. They are absolutely huge. They're like, I think this one was 80 by about maybe 180 centimetres, without the rope included and the hanging mechanism. I have deceivingly tall ceilings in my house, so it doesn't look as big as it is, but yeah, they're absolutely huge. They're really, really kind of unapologetic, and yeah, I just really enjoy doing them. And one thing I love about it is that I'm able to kind of push the boundaries of the domestic knitting technology.
Yeah.
And I'm able to kind of develop that whilst I'm kind of help push the industrial knitting technology in a kind of crafts-based way. So it's kind of like a bit of a middleman basically for everything I do. This kind of brings things together for me.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, well let's have a look, see if have we got some questions. We've got Jane Jones on the phones as ever. Jane Jones on the phones. Have we got any questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Marianne had to leave early, Ellie, but she said it was really great and she wants a link to your website. So
I'll send it out to anyone.
Brilliant.
I'll try and find people's addresses and send it out.
Yeah, we'll probably have the addresses as well if you can't find. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, and Jackie's asked a couple of things. She's asked, do you make a conscious effort to keep up your industry contacts in case you decide to produce a collection at some time in the future?
Oh God, yeah. And I've been really lucky actually, because knitwear is quite a kind of, although knitwear falls under the wider kind of fashion bubble, but people that are kind of well known in the knitwear industry all kind of know each other. So I've been really lucky actually that everyone that kind of I had as a freelancer still seems to be working in knitwear. Anyone who I've done freelance work myself for, still keeping, they keep in contact with me, they ask me for advice all the time. Everyone through my doctoral research has taken part in my surveys and my experiments to kind of further kind of back up my research. So yeah, I always keep a really conscious effort to keep in close contact with everyone. I try to. I hope that answers it. Does that answer it? I hope so.
Yeah, and yeah, Jackie's got another follow-up question. How did you find the intern experience, and was it key to your success in industry?
I would say it is, but I don't know if that's a good thing. I was really lucky in that I had a family that would be able to support me to do my internships. And I worry about this in the textile design industry, that if you're not from a background where you can be supported through internships, then you kind of miss out on some vital experiences, and it might hold you back from gaining employment. And I think that's something that you know, higher education settings really need to keep an eye on. And I'm sure a lot of people will agree with that. But what I will say is, you've got to pick your internships wisely, because you don't want to be diverting your hard-earned kind of time to a company that doesn't actually fully appreciate you. Thankfully, I was really lucky with that. And I did a few internships that ended up in more kind of permanent positions. So it was good. It was a good job that I took the plunge financially to do it. But yeah, I do think they were worth it for me, but I think there needs to be more support in place for other textile students. Because at the time, if I couldn't have, you know, afforded to pay for travel there or whatever, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Yeah, so it's difficult, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ellie. Yeah, Linda says, thanks for a fabulous talk. And please, can you tell us a bit more about your design process for the hangings? She's wondering if you do drawings, you know, to build up the design.
Yeah, so I work on, am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Right, okay, I'll see if I can show you it. Oh, there's another one there. Ooh, oopsie. Wait a second. Right then. I work on, oh, screen sharing stopped. Has it gone?
Just
1 second, let me get it up and I'll show you. So this is a piece of software. I'll share my screen in a second when it's loaded. It's called Designer Knit. I won't lie, I don't rate it that much. It's very, very kind of old-fashioned. But this is actually very similar to a lot of industrial knitwear design. Wait a minute, let me show you. So, can you see this?
Yeah, that's great.
Right, let me just make it full screen for you. So this is one of my tapestries before I knitted it. Now, as I zoom in, you'll be able to see the stitch design. And it looks a bit paint by numbers, actually, when you look at it, because it looks very pixelated and difficult. But each stitch has like information built into it on how it acts. So you can design a range of different stitch patterns and things from it. Now, I always only use 4 colours when I'm drawing my pattern, and I change colours as I'm knitting it, because I find it overloads the knitting technology. But God, it does make my eyes hurt sometimes.
So do you have to literally click on each stitch in order to make it a colour, a specific colour?
Yeah. And then, so can you see there, I've made it red, but then also I can make it miss a stitch, I can make it lace stitch, I can make it do a purl side, a back, you know, I can do everything with it. I can also import these onto garment shapes and things. And this is a bit of technology called Designer Knit, which is, it's great. It has so many limitations though. And I think that's probably because I understand industrial knitting software, but the limitations to it can be quite frustrating. But also the limitations of the machinery can be very frustrating. So what I kind of do is I have to physically link my computer up to my knitting machine. I have to download a pattern to it in parts because the memory is too small. I have to then note down what rows to change colours, what colour to change, because I could have 4 yarns set up and then say my black one might change to a different colour, and then I'll have to stop again and then do. It would never be done in industry because there's too many variables and it's too kind of complicated. One thing I will say is I absolutely love using this software in this way, where it's kind of for fun. Well, I say for fun. I enjoy kind of sitting on this on a night and drawing things, and then maybe never knitting it, and sometimes knitting it. But it is not very user friendly. And I always say I would love to work with the people that run designing it and make it a bit different, because I think they could do so much with it. But it's just it's like being on Microsoft Paint for knit.
Yeah, yeah.
But because I understand why it does certain things, I can kind of hack it. I change how it does things by, instead of just letting it completely take over my machine, I constantly stop my machine and change something and rearrange the patterns or rearrange the needles and things. So yeah, it's very tech based, and it's all designed on CAD software. But quite often I will draw it and then take a picture of it and import it onto here and then trace it with the tracing tools on here. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Is that quicker?
None of it's quick.
No.
Programming, I think this wall hanging, programming it took about maybe 2 weeks, and then actually checking it for faults because the machine won't accept it, which is why I have to only design it in 4 colours because the machine won't accept it. So it's definitely a very trial and error way of working. It's something that I am finding is getting quicker, actually. I think it's just because I'm just so used to it acting how it does. I can cope with it.
It's really fascinating to actually see that. It reminds me of a really ancient drawing program I had on my first computer, which was like an Amstrad CPC, because it gives that impression of almost being a bit pixelated.
It's like 8-bit, isn't it? Yeah. It's just, I mean, it does some amazing things, and the fact that it can link to any, like, I don't know if you can see here. Download to knit image. Let's see if it works. Oh no, I can't do it. But it can link to like so many different knitting machines, and that alone is fantastic. But yeah, it's just so outdated, and I think a lot of industrial software is like this, and they've tried to kind of skip the point of developing things by just giving designers the designs, and it's kind of lost a lot of innovation. Which is a bit of an issue.
Have we got any other questions? Jane Jones on the phones?
It's not a question, but Luke had to get off to another meeting, but he said it's really interesting and the tapestries are right up his street.
Bless him.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Well, that's been really interesting, Ellie. Thank you very much for sharing your process with us. It's fascinating, the mixture of holding on to craft, but then thinking about better ways of better processes, thinking about the ecological impact of practices in the industry for the past 20, 30 years. Yeah. It's been really interesting, and to see these, I mean, one thing that struck me is in some of the Nor designs, there's a lot of asymmetry, isn't there? And that seemed to be something that seems to be a real contrast between the Nor design, your design aesthetic in the Nor clothing, and then thinking about these tapestries.
Yeah, it's like I've found colour.
Yeah.
I always say this to people, I've just found colour recently. Do you know what it is? It's because I've bought a house that I've done up, and I've made it all either really dark, I've either painted it all black or painted it all really bright. Like it, I have discovered colour. I don't know what's happened to me. I used to be all like monochrome. I'm glad I have though.
Yeah. Well, okay, everyone. Well, we're going to wrap up there. thanks very much to Ellie for talking to us. And thanks to all of you for joining us again for the 4th Feral Fry Up. We're going to have the next Feral Fry Up. We're aiming for the 7th of December, but keep an eye on our Instagram. And oh, by the way, Ellie, have you got a website? You said about Instagram. If anyone wants to check out your work.
Yeah, so my website is Nora Knits. Let me just get it up. Because is my screen still on?
Yeah.
I'll get it up because I've forgotten if it's got a dash in the middle or not. That wouldn't be good, would it? Yeah, no, it doesn't have a dash in the middle. So my website is Nora Knit. There's a newsletter on there, so feel free. There's always things like for sale and stuff on there. There's a blog which has some interesting things about my research on there. And my Instagram, which shows my design work, and I often show kind of like my design stories behind things and how I've made things on there. That's Bloody Nora. So it's an _ Bloody Nora, all one word.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so so we're aiming for Feral Fry Up 5 before Christmas, 7th of December, in which we're hopefully going to get another 2 for the price of 1, which will be Hull-based painters Jeff Keane and Anthony Houseman. So hopefully you can join us for that one. But in the meantime, keep safe, follow the rules, and we hope to see you all again for the next Feral Fry Up. So thanks, Ellie, and thanks everyone.
Thanks, guys.
I don't know that way.